Welcome all back to Sathology channel. And today we have a very special guest. He has appeared on our show. He has written many books, very popular Krishna Yogeshwara series 1, 2, and 3rd is coming out. Now, today we are going to speak about Krishna as a politician and 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 what is Krishna's message to politicians. And some of you are part of this the Krishna group in the colleges. But those of you who are not part of it must listen to this conversation. So without delay, I'm bringing you Mr. Sanjay Dikshit ji. Yeah, welcome Sanjay Dikshit ji.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. And thank you so much for coming on here. You know, your books are amazing. I bought your books. The second one is going to come shortly. Actually, the second one came first. The first one is going to come second. So,
Okay.
but beautifully rendered. So the Krishna's description, the most detailed comes in Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, uh, is there, where is very detailed description is there, and also in Mahabharata. Now, coming back to this topic of discussion we have, so the politician today needs a guidance from someone. And so according to you, what can be the essential instruction of Krishna to a politician?
I think you mentioned Srimad Bhagavatam, so I have to give a little bit of background before coming to your question proper. Uh, very consciously, when I was writing the book, very consciously, I kept Srimad Bhagavatam away. You know why? Because this book I was writing from the rational perspective. I have mentioned in one of my YouTube videos, which is available on my Jaipur Dialogues channel, you can see, where I have explained what is the meaning of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. So, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti is not only in the context of various sects and various other approaches, but it is also in the context of the three major approaches through what we call the Man, Buddhi, and Chitta. So, Man, Buddhi, and Chitta, each of them can have a different approach. You have the what I call the Marg, Madhyam, and Tattva. So, the Bhakti Marg, you have the Bhakti Marg, and the Madhyam for that is Man or Manas, and the Tattva is Prem or Bhakti or Sneh or whatever. Because in our language, especially in Sanskrit, there are about I think a dozen terminology for love: sneh, vatsalya, prem, bhakti. All these are love and devotional, and they are the synonyms for that. Then there is the what is called the Jnana Marg, and the Jnana Marg, the madhyam or the medium is buddhi, and the tattva is tark or rationality. And of course, then the highest Yoga Marg, Krishna is Yogeshwar. He is actually giving us a glimpse of the Yoga Marg, where the Madhyam is consciousness, and Tat itself is, that is, it's beyond everything. That is, when you go, what is called the Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas has explained it beautifully. Agun Arup Alak Ajjoi. So Agun beyond gunas, Arup beyond form, Alak beyond sight, and Aj beyond knowledge. So that is that is something that is not easily approachable to general people. But in this age of Kali Yuga, what we do is that we are always asking for a rational explanation for everything. So when I started writing Krishna Gopeshwar first, then I was confronted by this problem, because if I went by Srimad Bhagavatam, then the Prema Tattva and the Manas medium would take over. And then I would not be able to explain everything in a rational manner, which would appeal to Buddhi. So it is very important to know that difference first. That my books are written from the Marg Madhyam Tattva is Gyan, Buddhi and Tark. And of all the three, this is the most limited, mind you. This particular Marg and this particular medium of Buddhi is the most limited. It has the greatest limitations on both sides. Because Manas can have any kind of flight of imagination. So when you are looking at a lore, a Krishna lore from the point of view of Manas, your flights of fancies are unlimited. You can go anywhere and your Prem Tattva can give you any kind of manifestation of the Lord. But that becomes very limited when you are examining it from the point of view of Buddhi. So that is the basic approach that I must explain before we go on to that question proper.
No, very good points, and you put it very correctly in the words, because the Puran, Bhagavad Puran, is written by Vyasdev under the instructions of Narad Muni from for a sannyasi, or for a person who wants to go on really on the bhakti marg. And Mahabharat, on the other hand, is written from the Itihas point of view. So right there, you have correctly captured that that's major difference. So when somebody reads Mahabharat, he gets encouraged to do an action. And when someone studies Srimad Bhagavatam, he gets encouraged to take sannyas. So that's why you very correctly pointed out. And so coming back to this question of lessons to politicians, so there is whether it's in US or in India, the politicians always need some lessons and they don't want to listen to anyone. So based on your writings, Krishna is Yogeshwar, and also he is one of the topmost politicians. So if Krishna was there, what will be the message to a politician today in the democratic setup?
You see, the politician's character of Krishna is examined by me mostly in the second book. Because in the first book, it starts from a little before his birth, and that is the time when Kans is taking over the throne of Mathura. A lot of politics is discussed there before the birth of Krishna. And that also shows, in fact, when actually Kansa takes over, and it is done right in the middle of that Sudharma Sabha, it is very different from what is shown in Bhagavatam. The way I have depicted it there. That is more, I'll tell you, one of the best Buddhi Madhyam depiction of Krishna's life comes in Narendra Kohli's Mahasamar. And Krishnavataram of K.M. Munshi, that also comes fairly close. Because even in K.M. Munshi's Krishnavataram, whatever events he is depicting, he is trying to make it plausible. He is trying to make it appeal to the rational intellect. So it is from that point of view I have shown that how bigoted and intolerant minority can overwhelm a tolerant majority. That's exactly what happened when Kansa overturned and did a kind of a coup and took over the throne of Mathura. So that is that lesson prior to birth of Krishna. After Krishna is born, and then he takes on Kans, and after a while, after he gains consciousness, he actually takes on Kans quite consciously. And there I have depicted one instance at the time when this final act is being played, and that in that wrestling arena, Chanur has been killed, Mushtik has been killed by Krishna and Balaram. Then the entire Mathura is asking for Kans also to be killed. And at that time, Kans kind of loses his mind. It is very clear from his actions, the way he's behaving, that he has lost the grip of his mind. All his soldiers, all his bodyguard, everybody is fled. He's all alone. He's there for the taking. And at that time, Balarama tells Krishna that, look, we need not kill him because he looks completely lost, so we can arrest him. At that time, Krishna rationalizes it and says that, look, he was arrested earlier also. Because in the book, my book, the way it is treated, it is shown that because of his indiscretions, he was actually put into prison by Mughal Sen. And later on, he was released, put on parole, and he made use of that little concession given to him and actually committed a coup with the help of the army of his father-in-law, that was Jarasandha. So then Krishna rationalizes it and tells Balarama, what is the guarantee? You tell me which one is more dangerous, letting him go, arresting him, or killing him. What is the guarantee that not killing him right now would result in much more violence against the people of Mathura all over again, or not just against the people of Mathura, against the people of the entire Bharatvarsh or entire Aryavarta? Then he asks the public in the book. And the public, of course, you know that they were so oppressed and they were so angry, and they were looking for the Taranhar, which is there in Bhagavatam also, that in one voice, all of them rejected Balaram's contention and asked Krishna to kill him. So that is another significant lesson. I often refer to Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome. The Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome, the way Prithviraj Chauhan let go of Muhammad Ghori was actually not in accordance with Dharma. And had Krishna been there, then he would have advised him to finish it. It was not the kind of adversary. If he had done a proper, what is called Purva Paksha of Muhammad Ghori, then he would have realized that he was indulging in some kind of an behavior which was completely totalitarian and which was not known. That was not known in the code of war with which the people in Aryavarta used to fight. That is one more lesson. Then we come to the second book where Krishna is actually growing up. And then there are a number of instances where you can see his genius and where you can see the particular statement that he makes, that he holds Bhishma responsible. Rather, I would say that he holds Bhishma as the person who bears the highest responsibility for the Mahabharata war. And that is because of a very simple reason, that Vidur used to say, in fact, Vidur said that at the time of birth of Duryodhana. Kulasyarthe tyajit ekam, gramasyarthe kulam tyajit, gramam janapadasyarthe atmarthe prithvin tyajit. That is, for the benefit of the community, you have to give up the individual's concern or individual's rights. And for the benefit of the Kulasyarthe tyajit ekam, gramasyarthe kulam tyajit. And for your village or your larger community, then you have to forswear the interests of your kul or the immediate community. And for the benefit of the Rashtra, Janapadas is the Rashtra of that time, you have to forswear the benefits or rights of the larger community also when you have to look at the Rashtra first. And if you're looking at your own salvation, then you have to go for liberation, then you have to leave this earth. This is one of the most profound shlokas that are found in Mahabharata. And it is this that Krishna always practices. That wherever the larger interest is there, and of course for understanding the larger interest, you have to have that viveka. If you do not have that discriminatory wisdom, that is why Krishna is called Yogeshwar. And that is why I always say that people talk of Gita a lot. But then there is a very interesting story in this. And the story is that people asked after the war was over, then Satyaki, I think it was Satyaki. There were very few people who were left alive after that. What was that Upadesh that you gave to Arjun? Because we could see that Arjun was not interested in the war and he had given up and he had cast down all his astras and shastras. What was it that you told him that he suddenly got recharged and he got up again? So Krishna feigns ignorance and he says, no, I don't remember saying anything to him. And Satyaki is also joined by, I think, one of the Pandavas, and they say, come on, don't play the fool on us. We've seen you preaching to Krishna, and that was a quite considerable time. Gita has 700 shlokas, so if you do 700 shlokas, I think it's going to take at least 1 or 2 hours. And for 1 or 2 hours, the whole action was stalled. He was watching the entire Kaurava army, the entire Pandava army, they were all watching this whole scene. And before that, Arjuna had actually asked Krishna to take the chariot in the middle of the 2 armies. And it was there that the whole scene was taking place, so it was watched by everybody. So they said, don't play the fool on us. You were there and it was going on for such a long time. What were you telling him? He said, okay, whatever I was telling him was for Arjun. It is not for you. There hangs a tale. That tale is that Arjun himself was not an ordinary person. We've seen in the Mahabharata story that Arjun was a person who had gone to Indra's place to get the Divyastras and Devastras. And he was the only one among Pandavas who had experienced what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the highest state of yoga. And the only other persons who had experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi was Krishna himself, because Krishna was always in that state. He was in the Turiya state all the time. But Arjun had gone up to that state and come down. So he had that experience. So it is because Arjun had that experience is that the Gita was preached to Arjun. And it is also from that point of view, you'll find that a similar exposition is given to Uddhava towards the end. So the patra is very important. That is why I say that if you start telling the story of Gita to a politician, he would not understand anything because he's simply not capable of understanding it. He doesn't have that experience. So people, they do all kinds of explanations of Gita very loosely. But it is very important to understand that you have to become a Supatra to understand Gita. That is the other explanation of why Shri Krishna blamed Bhishma the most, because Bhishma ignored the Rashtra and put his own pratigya, his own vow that he had taken to protect the throne of Hastinapur as higher than the calling of Dharma, the calling of Rashtra. The Rashtra means the larger community of Aryavat.
Now, coming back to this very nice explanation you did. So, when it comes to Hindus, there is a very misconception. They claim we are very peaceful. We have never attacked anyone. We have always been peaceful. So, is it considered dharmic or it is considered adharmic? Because when somebody is doing violence on them, they're just a mute spectator, and they're very proud in being peaceful. But people, according to Bhagavad Gita, people have to act if somebody attacks, or even if so, people cannot be artificially in any state. They'll revert back to their natural state. So when somebody suppresses their own expressions and try to be extra peaceful despite deep provocations, they will have to act at one point according to their own nature, and at that time the violence and the explosion will be much higher. So what do you have to say on that, please?
Yes, I mean, yesterday only I had written out a tweet which about sums it up. That is basically the message of Sri Krishna only. And I'll read out that tweet because that is the essence of the answer that I should give in response to this question. I said that misinterpretation of three great Sanatan sayings has caused untold damage and time to get the correct sense. And the first of them is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And the second is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. And the third is Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. So this notion of Ahimsa, again in the book it is given in great details with a lot of examples and a lot of instances have been cited. That the Ahimsa belongs to the Ahimsa, what we call, is not the physical or external non-violence. The Ahimsa has to come from your man or chitta. As in the 18th Adhyaya, I think it's the 17th shloka of the 18th Adhyaya, in which Krishna says that Yasya na ahankrito bhavo, Yasya na ahankrito bhavo, buddhir yasya na lipyate. That is the important thing. If you do not have that sense of identification and you do not have that ahankar and you are nirlipta, and whatever you are doing that external non-violence or the physical non-violence, which is often, physical violence, which is often treated as hinsa in some of the other laws. If you are doing it without ahankar and without being lipta in it, then that is not hinsa. That is pure ahimsa. But ahimsa is that of the mana and chitta. Ahimsa is not that what you perform. Otherwise, he would not exhort Arjun to fight the war. In fact, right in the beginning, when he casts down his weapons, he says, Atha chetva imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyati. That if you do not fight this war, then what will happen? That you will lose your swadharma, you will lose your kirti. Both of these will go. Klaivyam ma smagamaha partha naitattu upapadyate shudram hridaya daurvalyam chattotishta parantapa. In fact, I have done a detailed video on this ahimsa paramo dharma. And these three also, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. how they are misinterpreted by the pacifists among us, and how they are misinterpreted to mean that you should tolerate injustices upon yourself, that you should tolerate intolerance. That is never the intent. That has never been the intent of our Shastras, and of course, never been the intent of Krishna at all. So, the first thing that Krishna would tell any politician would be, do not tolerate the intolerant, which is the same as what we call the Karl Popper paradox. That is, tolerating intolerance will result in the end of tolerance. So the Krishna uttered this Karl Popper paradox right at the time of Mahabharata. That would be his, I think, most important message to the present day Indian politician who is busy appeasing even the people who are abusing.
That disease has come to American politicians also, so it's not just India.
Yes, I agree. So you could tell them that lesson as well.
Regular.
I can give you the link to all those 3 videos. You can play it to them, but they're all 3 in, I think all of them are in Hindi, except one maybe.
There's one more misconception I'll just add to your list. You have said 3, and the 4th is Atiti Devo Bhava. So that is also a problem there, because Atiti, not an Atiti which has intentions of an enemy. That is not an Atiti. That becomes a Shatru. So not everybody can be welcome there. So you summarize it so well. The message to the politics is very clear, that political correctness has no place and is not sanctioned by Bhagavad Gita and any of our Shastra. And political correctness destroys the native society. So world over, the native societies, whether it is American natives or in India, the natives are the Hindus. They all have ended up in museums because of this particular political correctness. So please, I know you want to say something. Please go ahead.
No, I was listening to your question.
So towards the end of the program, this is the last phase. So would you like to add something and communicate to the audience on this particular topic?
Yes, as I said, Krishna's message is very, very clear. And for the cause of larger dharma, he is willing to compromise on the what is called Yudhishthira-like dharma. See, you also have, in Mahabharata, you have such a great variety of characters. You have Yudhishthira, who is absolutely bent upon that politically correct sense of dharma. But Krishna is gifted with what is called Vivek. So you have to have that Vivek to understand the situation and then devise the best solution according to the situation, keeping all the while the final goal of the dharma in perspective. So that requires a Yogeshwar like Krishna. That is not possible for everyone. Like Bhishma and Yudhishthira were great characters. They were great people, I think, once in an epoch, those kind of people. But even they had lacked this kind of wisdom, this discriminatory wisdom that is called Vivek. Even they had lacked. So how to keep the larger perspective, the larger dharma, the larger goal in mind, and then tailoring it to the situations where you realize that if we stick to the letter, then ultimately the larger dharma is going to come to harm, and then tailor your response accordingly. That is why you see that he devises ways. In fact, he tells Pandavas to go to Bhishma and ask himself. Pandavas go to Bhishma and actually they ask Bhishma himself as to what to do. And then the Bhishma tells them the way. Look, I was doing this war in the hope that somehow, probably at one point, a sandhi would be achieved, a ceasefire, or some kind of a treaty would happen. But Duryodhan is absolutely adamant, doesn't look possible. So it is best that I now leave. So help me leave, and this is the way you can help me leave the scene. Similarly, with Dronacharya, and there is, of course, rationalization available, because even Vidur Niti says, Shathe Shatyam Samacharitu. Somebody is a dusht, somebody is a shat, he is a rogue, he is a dusht. Then using dushtata against him is perfectly justified. So all these great Maharathis and Authorities, they all get together, and against all canons of war, all the code of war that was prevalent at that time, against all the moral principles that were prevalent at that time, they all get together and kill a 16-year-old Abhimanyu. Then at that very time, they had forfeited all these defenses. And Krishna had the sagacity, Krishna had the wisdom to appreciate that and use it at the right time. Because he was very clear in his mind that the larger dharma, the victory of the larger dharma would happen only if Pandavas win, because they are on the side of dharma.
Correct.
And if by using some kind of a dharmic code during the war, Pandavas happen to lose, then adharma would prevail. Duryodhan winning would be the victory of adharma. This was very clear in his mind. Once that clarity was there, once that vivek was there, then Yogeshwar Krishna used all his wisdom to advise the Pandavas properly. So that is what I would also tell the politicians, that okay, you can make these compromises, but then if you do not have the vivek, then you end up being like Duryodhana. So that vivek is very important, and that vivek requires sadhana. That vivek just doesn't come that easily.
That's right. So thank you so much, Sanjay Dikshit ji, for your time. It's around 7 in the morning, and so many people heard you live and in their breakfast cafeterias and other places. Thank you so much, and we love your talks with us, discussions with us on this Authology platform. We have more clubs opening, and we again want you back next time with a similar topic. That's a very interesting topic for the political science students, and they will love this kind of insight. So, namaskar and thank you. Have a wonderful,
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.